The story begins in the dark basement of an old apartment building. A strange splashing of water is heard from an open sewer hatch. The camera zooms in on the manhole, from where muffled whispers and thuds are heard. An inscription, scratched out with rusty tools, can be seen on the basement wall. They are under us. Two plumbers, Max and Alex, get an emergency repair call to an old house on the outskirts of town. The house, built over 100 years ago, has a tangled system of pipes that haven't been updated in a long time. The residents complain of strange noises coming from the pipes, whispering, banging, and even screaming. When Max and Alex arrive on the scene, they are greeted by an elderly concierge who warns, "Be careful. Something has been living in the pipes in this house for years." Max waves it off, taking it for fiction, but Alex feels uneasy. During the repair process, plumbers encounter unexplained phenomena. There is almost no water in the pipes, but periodically they emit a low, muffled sound like a moan. Max finds a strange object in one of the pipes. It's a doll's head with its eyes carved out. They go down into the basement to check out the main pipes. The basement seems too big for a house like this. Its walls are covered in green mold and the air smells rotten. Alex notices a dark, thick liquid dripping from one of the pipes, moving against the law of gravity. Max decides to open the main sewer hatch. A powerful stream of air rushes out of it, as if someone is breathing. They hear a strange whispering coming from the depths of the pipes. They are listening. They're waiting. In one of the pipes, Alex finds an old note stuck in it that reads, "Don't go any deeper. These aren't pipes. These are their tunnels." Max, still skeptical, decides to sneak further down the system to fix the clog. Alex offers to call for help, but Max insists on finishing the job. Inside one of the large pipes, Max discovers an entire labyrinth running deep. The walls of the maze show claw marks and strange symbols scratched into the metal. Suddenly, the light from their flashlights begins to flicker. Alex hears someone calling his name from another pipe. Max finds a pile of bones and rusty tools. Among them is an old badge belonging to a plumber who disappeared here years ago. He realizes that something in these pipes is taking and feeding people. And the conversation here, if anyone cares to be starters, taking people. And as they try to get out, the pipes begin to make a loud metallic humming sound. Long tentacle-like shadows emerge from the holes and begin to reach for them. Max struggles against the shadows, but he is pulled deep into the system, and only his scream remains in the air. Alex manages to run out of the basement, but he hears heavy footsteps behind him. He turns around and sees that a creature that looks like a fusion of a human body and metal pipes is climbing out of the pipes and whispers, "We are part of this house. Now you are too." Alex runs outside and calls the police. When they get back to the basement, everything seems normal. The pipes are fine, and Max has disappeared. Alex notices water dripping from one of the risers, but in the reflection of the drip, he sees Max's face screaming. The story ends with a new plumber coming to work in the same house. Rusty stains begin to appear on his tools, and a whisper comes from a nearby pipe, "You're next." Was it an ancient creature lurking in the pipes? Or had the house itself become a living organism, consuming humans to sustain its existence? And if so,
The story begins with a night scene. The camera moves slowly through a dense, dark forest. The branches of the trees sway as if something is watching the viewer. The crunching of branches and heavy breathing can be heard in the distance. The camera focuses on a figure running through the woods, breathing heavily and looking over its shoulder. The figure falls, and something approaches from the darkness. But the screen fades out, leaving only the sound of a scream. The main character is Sarah, a young woman who, along with her friends Tom, Lisa, and Mike, go on a weekend camping trip in the wild woods. The group has heard of a mysterious place that the locals call the Shadow Hollow. Legends say that people who enter this forest often disappear, leaving behind only footprints. Tom, a skeptic, laughs at these stories, saying they're just country bikes to scare off tourists. But a local guide warns, if you see a shadow that doesn't move the way it should, run. At first, the hike seems ordinary, birds singing, wind noise. By evening, however, the forest becomes strangely quiet. No sound of birds, no rustling of leaves. Lisa notices that the compass is leading them in different directions, the arrow spinning without stopping. Sarah feels someone watching them, although there is no one around. She recalls reading some study on copying computer-based figures. At night in the tent, Sarah hears whispering coming from behind her. She turns around but sees only Mike, sound asleep. A vague shadow flickers behind the tent, moving against the light of their campfire. The next day, the group comes across an old wooden cross overgrown with moss. Scratched on it is the word, "Leave it." Tom decides to take a picture of the find, but his camera turns off and the screen is covered in static. In the distance, Sarah sees a silhouette standing between the trees. It appears too tall and unnaturally thin. As the group goes deeper into the forest, they begin to see strange symbols in the trees that seem to follow them. Lisa is the first to disappear. She is found an hour later, standing motionless, with a blank stare. She whispers, "They see us." Sarah finds an old diary in an abandoned cabin that belonged to a previous camper. The diary describes strange creatures that call themselves shadows. They appear at night, but cannot exist in bright light. The diary says, "They take those who dare to see them." Mike, while reading the diary, notices a strange shadow appearing in the corner of the room that doesn't belong to any of them. The lantern light begins to flicker. The group decides to run, but the shadows begin to chase them. They hear Lisa screaming, but when they turn around, they see only her silhouette blending into the trees. Tom is left to fight, but his flashlight goes out and he is swallowed up by the darkness. Sarah and Mike make it to the edge of the woods, but Mike suddenly stops and starts to move backwards. He says quietly, "They took my shadow. Now I'm theirs." His eyes turn black and he disappears into the thicket. Sarah emerges from the forest at dawn, exhausted and frightened. She thinks she has been saved, but notices that her shadow is moving differently from herself. In the final shot, Sarah looks at her shadow, which begins to slowly reach for her. Are the shadows a spawn of the forest, or is it an ancient curse connected to the place itself? And can Sarah really escape if her shadow now belongs to them? The story begins with a nighttime view of the luxurious but slightly dilapidated Crystal Peak Hotel. The camera slowly approaches the building and the viewer hears a voiceover saying, "No one stays in this place forever." Inside, behind the front desk, the hotel receptionist looks at the reservation list. His hand freezes when he sees the room number, 616. He exhales. Someone picked it again. The main character is Mary, a 32-year-old photographer who stays at the Crystal Peak for one night during her trip. Her room is 616. At first glance, the hotel looks okay, but Mary notices that the hallways are too quiet and the lighting is dimmer than it should be. At the front desk, the receptionist, Mr. Hall, warns, "If anything bothers you at night, don't open the door." Mary takes this as a strange attempt at a joke, but later she remembers these words. In her room, Mary notices that the furniture seems strangely worn for such an expensive hotel. On the bedside table is an old key with the number 616 engraved on it. The room's window opens with difficulty, and strange, barely audible sounds, reminiscent of whispers, come from outside. Later, as Mary flips through the photos on her camera, she notices a strange thing. In every shot from her room, a blurry shadow appears standing in the corner. The shadow only appears, and of course, it has to be there the first time. During the night, Mary is awakened by a loud knock on the door. She asks who's there, but there is no answer. Looking through the peephole, she sees a man standing with his back to her. When she asks again, he slowly turns his head, but his face appears distorted, like a broken mirror. Mary calls the front desk, but all she hears on the other end of the line is a strange whisper. "You picked this room." Mary goes down to the counter but doesn't find the receptionist. In the archives behind the counter, she finds an old sign-in book. It has records of other guests who stayed in room 616. Many of them have disappeared and their names are crossed out. The last entry reads, "He's waiting in the shadows." As she returns to her room, she notices that the hallway has gotten longer. It's as if the walls are moving and the lights are beginning to flicker. When Mary enters the room, her bed is made, but written in blood on the mirror is, "You're the last one." A child's crying begins to echo in the room, changing to a woman's scream. Mary finds an old doll with its eyes scratched out in the closet. Suddenly the bathroom door slams shut and a dark liquid begins to pour out from underneath. Mary tries to leave the room but finds that the door won't open. She turns and sees the figure of a man with empty eyes standing in the corner. He whispers, "Welcome home." The next morning, the new administrator, Mr. Hall, finds the room empty. Mary's belongings are still there, but she is gone. He takes the sign-in book and crosses out her name, adding it to the list of disappeared guests. The last shot shows a new guest asking at the front desk, "What about room 616? The receptionist replies, "It just became available." Was the hotel cursed, or has room 616 become a portal to another world that draws in new victims? Who will be next